Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Indiana Black Expo Minority Small Business Series presented by Key Bank. Today's webinar will focus on the benefits of having a banking relationship to maximize your funding opportunities. My name is Jean Poole. I am the CEO, founder, and chief servant of EQ Performance, a training and leadership development company, and I will be your host. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors and partners for this webinar. Before we start, I have a few housekeeping rules for you. First, if you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box and we will answer as many as possible before our session ends. Also, toward the end of the session, there will be a link to the session survey in the chat box. It is so important for you to stay on and fill out the survey because this way we know what you guys are interested in, because we know this is a huge time commitment. So we want to know what to keep bringing to you. The panelists for today's session are Ivory Salmon, Vice President and Business Banking Relationship Manager at Key Bank, our sponsor. Therese Fairgood, Branch Manager for Flagstar Bank in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and John P. DeLucia, Chief Lending Officer at Citizens Bank. Let's start with each panelist telling the audience a little bit about themselves and providing an overview in their area of expertise on marketing, branding, and storytelling. Our first panelist is Miss Ivory Salmon, Key Bank, and she's with Key Bank. Key Bank has been a long-standing sponsor, partnering with Indiana Black Expo, supporting minority businesses across the state of Indiana. Ivory, you're on.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you to the Indiana Black Expo for putting on such valuable content for our community. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about public distrust in banking, specifically as it relates to people of color. 63 million Americans are either unbanked or underbanked. And so that's a pretty staggering number when you think about the number of people and the amount that the amount of time we use dealing with our finances. I mean, everything requires some sort of money or transaction or what have you. And so I want to leave time, obviously, for some of the other panelists and really just be here as a resource. I work as a business banking relationship manager. I support companies, mid to large companies in the central Indiana region, providing them with resources, working capital, or money that they can use to either start a franchise or either to grow their business or expand, and also to provide them the capital resources they need to truly be successful. And so I found with our smaller business clients, there's a huge disconnect and a huge level of distrust. A lot of it is resulting in bank fees not being as transparent, obviously, as we would like them to be sometimes, and then also attributed by just the wealth gap. There's a generational wealth gap between minorities and people who are non-Latino, Caucasian. It's a huge gap, and I look to serve as a resource, for all of those people. And I think it's important, some of the biggest advantages, just to kind of go through some of the advantages in having a relationship with a bank. Obviously, you get the financial expertise. So studies show that 50% or people who have a relationship with a financial institution or with a financial advisor have a tendency to show 50% more in wealth. And so I liken having a banking relationship to having a doctor. And so we don't know what we don't know, right? But it's important. Our money and our health are the two most important things to us. And so when we think about the importance of leveraging a banking relationship, having that access to those resources, having someone who can advocate for you, someone who can provide you with information on different programming, different strategies and structures, and people who can take you obviously from where you are today and to really bridge that gap to where you want to be. And I think at the bank, sometimes we have this sort of nervousness, if you will, and we're bankers, we're people too. And so sometimes it's really difficult, and we think that us bankers have it all together and we have perfect credit and we can't understand, other people's perception and all of those things. And I think really just LinkedIn is a great resource. I think the best thing is to just get connected. Find someone who is either has a business that's similar to yours and has a banking relationship that can make that introduction for you, or reach out via LinkedIn. Programs obviously like the IBE is a great resource where you can get connected to bankers that are in your area to help sort of bridge that gap. So those are just a few little tidbits that I wanted to share at the beginning of the call. Obviously, I'm here if there are any questions that you have throughout the call. But again, just really excited to be here with all of you today.
Ivory, thank you so much. You did that in record time. Everyone, I want to encourage you to stay on because we're going to come back and address various topics that come up. Ivory mentioned being underbanked. When we come back to you, Ivory, I want you to help people understand what that means. But next, we're going to go on to our next panelist, Therese Fairgood. And Therese is a branch manager for Flagstar Bank's downtown branch in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Last year, Flagstar and IBE and the IBE Fort Wayne chapter partnered in a major initiative helping small businesses in the Fort Wayne area. And Therese, I'm sure you're going to tell us a little bit more about that.
I am. Thank you so much, Jean. Thank you for having me on the panel today. I'm excited about this topic. I am the branch manager of a Flagstar Bank located right downtown. And I love to be able to connect with customers. So this topic is so meaningful for me because my goal when I'm coaching my team members is not about selling product or services. We're all about relationships, establishing those lifelong relationships. So thank you for having me. And I'm going to share with you guys some tips today on establishing those relationships. So when I consider the topic for discussion, I always put myself in my consumer shoes and my small business customer shoes. What's in it for me? It's not a selfish question, but really, if I'm choosing your bank to establish my personal affairs with you, I want to know what's in it for me. So we see our customers here at Flagstar as our top priority. So it's very important for that interpersonal development with our customers. We want to know about you personally, and then we also want to know how can we assist you with achieving your financial goals. So if I'm putting myself in the shoes of my customers, right, I don't want a cookie cutter relationship. I want that top-notch Chick-fil-A relationships. I want quality when I'm going into the branch and sit down to discuss financial affairs, right? So what's in it for me? It's important when you're establishing your banking relationship to have that conversation. You might not get all your questions answered at the initial meeting if you're not being open and candid about what you're really going in there for. And so my bankers and myself, we take our time with listening intently to our customers because we might be able to offer additional solutions that they didn't even come into the bank for. Secondly, networking, partnerships, and referrals is critical when you're considering a banking relationship. So if I have customers come in and see me and we're sitting down and we're talking about their small businesses, there just might be an opportunity for us to network together, to partner together, right? So how can I support your business? You're coming to our branch for us to service you, but is there a way for us to connect outside the branch? I have been successful at establishing a lot of relationships by just networking along. I believe Simone said from LinkedIn, but within a community, I always try to look for opportunities to be a part of that as a vendor or either providing financial literacy. So if I have a small business that comes in and they have employees, there might be an opportunity to teach financial literacy. And I did read that there's a statistic that 90% of employees are happier or perform better when their financial affairs are in order, right? So I know that discussing finances open and candidly could be a little sore spot for some people. It's almost like, I don't want to talk about finances, but we make a point to go to our doctor's appointments yearly. We go get our teeth cleaned twice a year. Why not have a conversation about your finances, right? And thirdly, referrals. We talk about that. I have been able to have a lot of referrals and partnerships that just came out of the relationships that I currently have. If you do a great job with your customers, they are going to send you referrals. And so that extends your relationship with your customers, right? Because they not only want you to help them with their finances, but then they'll also refer to you, their family members, and their friends. So the third key factor that I want you to take away is two-way relationship. So what do I mean by a two-way relationship? So if you're coming to us and you're choosing us as your bank of choice, we should be also considering ways to partner with you, right? So I believe Flagstar Bank has done an outstanding job of this. Back in 2008, they acquired Wells Fargo, about 28 branches. And it's no secret that the transition didn't go as smoothly as planned. However, they made it a point to do what was necessary to rebuild those relationships within our community. So they came up with an initiative called Flagstar Crafts Community to invest back into those small businesses that we serve and see every day. So they gave about $140,000 to 44 local nonprofit organizations to show that we're supporting them in their communities. And then lastly, another highlight that we're reflecting on is how Flagstar didn't stop just at the first initial investment in the community back in 2018 and 2019. We know that last year was a very critical time for us. We all experienced the crisis of the pandemic, and unfortunately, the most adverse group of people that it affected the most was our minority small businesses. And Flagstar didn't waste any time acting on the need to get into our community and provide additional resources, grants to about 35 of our nonprofit organizations located in South Bend and Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I was privileged enough to be able to host the recognition event for some of those recipients right downtown in our branches. And I will share that those testimonials were so heartfelt. And I knew that Flagstar did the right thing by jumping on the needs to be able to assist our nonprofit organizations. Those testimonials and the people that were able to share that, I didn't know that I didn't know anything about Flagstar when they got here in 2018, but I see now what their mission is about, I see what their vision is about, and they really care about giving back and investing in the community. And I was able to establish several relationships from that event alone. So in conclusion, I didn't want to go without sharing the department that really is set up and designed to help us to continue to be involved with our community and support our small businesses. We have a phenomenal team of specialists, as you can see listed here. And I want to thank them for just all that they have done for us already and giving Flagstar a great name for being able to support our small business customers through those trying times. I did also want to highlight that you might have heard on Monday that we are merging with another great bank. And so we're growing and we're expanding, and we're going to be open to looking for new hires that will want to join our team. And so my contact information is listed right on the screen for you on where you can contact me, and you can send me your resumes directly. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Jean.
Thank you so much, Therese. And that's such a great thing you guys did that it warrants my repeating it because I kind of butchered it. Your branch, the
Yes.
the national IBE and the Fort Wayne branch of the IBE got together and made that large grant opportunity happen. And we really want to thank you for that, because that truly shows that you guys are interested in giving back.
Absolutely.
And thank you. So we'll
Thank
come
you.
back to you because you mentioned a statistic as well that was 90% of people felt that by having their financial affairs in order was important. That's something that I talk about a lot from a leadership training perspective. I say you can get your personal life together, but unless you've got the financial side together, you are incomplete. So you were right on point with that. Thank you. And we'll come back and discuss more of that as well. Mr. John DeLucia.
Yeah.
And I kind of butchered your name as well, but we've talked several times and gotten a chance to know each other. And I am so happy to share some of the things we discussed. So let me introduce who you are. Let me find who you are. Well, you know what? Technology over here is acting goofy. So John, I'm actually going to let you introduce yourself and say which bank you're with. And after you do that, I want to have a little conversation with you. So tell us who you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Jean, so much. And really, first and foremost, I just want to thank, Indiana Black Expo for allowing me to participate. Thank KeyBank for sponsoring this, and Eugene for moderating, and Ivory and Therese for kind of collaborating on this. It's been great getting to know them a bit, and they just did a fantastic job. I was going to say they took all my points, but they both did a wonderful job. My name is John DeLucia. I am the Chief Lending Officer for Citizen State Bank, who's the best bank that many of you have never heard of. We are a small family-owned community bank. We've been in metropolitan Indianapolis just about 8 years, but the bank goes back to 1873 with a headquarters in Newcastle. But we're continuing to expand in metropolitan Indianapolis. First off, Gina, it bothers me that we need to have this discussion, although we do, and we know we do. And frankly, I know our industry, banking, has a bit of a checkered past at times. One of my favorite quotes is, "We reserve the right to get better." And I think that's why we're here, and that's why we're participating in these kind of events. And I think,
mute here. Okay, so you and I had some pretty interesting conversations, and you've been in the banking industry. Do you mind sharing how many years?
well, not as many as you think, about 20.
Okay. No, that's a good number. Well, I'd like to say to the audience, many of you are familiar with a comedian who's no longer with us, but the great comedian Bernie Mac. Bernie Mac, as one of his taglines, used to be, "Who you with? Who you with?" And John, as I got to know you, you've got a tagline that kind of goes along with that. Would you share that with us?
Well, I will, Gene. Thank you so much. Probably about 15 years ago, I was working for a large bank as a business banker, and just really trying to differentiate, kind of what I did, and recognizing that, you do business with individuals, not with institutions necessarily, and you build relationships with individuals. And I think that's one of the most critical things. And Ivory and Therese both talked about the benefits of that. So I kind of shamelessly dubbed myself the Hoosier Banker. And the point being, play on words, is really the first question I would ask a new business I was introduced to was, who is your banker? And the response, almost 100%, was, well, I bank at this bank or that bank or the other bank. And then I would follow up with, well, but who's your person, right? Who do you work with? And with a very too high of a percentage, well, I used to work with so-and-so, but I think they left, and there's a nice teller at this branch I talked to. And that's frankly our industry doing a disservice, particularly to business owners. And then the follow-up to the Hoosier Banker part is basically, every business has a bank, but not every business has a banker. And I think that's a shame. I think that's really the main purpose of this call, is to make that case. What's interesting is there's a big disconnect where I do think many business owners, they want that relationship with the banker, but they just, have had a hard time locating the right person. Now, conversely, I can assure you, our team, and Ivory and Therese and their colleagues, we want relationships with business owners and spend a lot of time and effort to do that. And there's just a disconnect. So how do we get together? Because some of the statistics that were shared are overwhelming. And then anecdotally, just firsthand experience that if you don't have a person, you're very likely to have a poor experience, especially if there's trouble. So if you really need help and you have a problem and you're going to call a toll-free number, it's tough, and as important as, digital and online banking, those things are all great tools. But when, something's going down, you really need a person. I remember Therese saying having that advocate internally is just so critical, because in banking, I don't know in the history of banking that anyone has ever gotten fired for saying the word no, because there's risk, there's regulation. If people are uncomfortable and they're risk averse, they're going to say, yeah, I'm sorry, you can't do that. You can't do this. And that's where that relationship comes in, because if you know the individual and you know what's happening, you can intervene for them. And you can say, well, actually, yeah, we know what's going on, very comfortable with this. So the more of a relationship you have with your banker, the better you're served. I remember, I'm sure Therese and Ivory both have stories like this back in my banking center manager days. You would have people that for whatever reason, they're buying real estate or they need money available sooner than you typically would. If you just run blind on that, it's tough. It's very tough to do.
So John, I'm going to ask the other ladies to join us, but there was another discussion that you and I had, and it was about anytime you have a trusting relationship, you need to know who you're dealing with before you can trust them. So can we talk about exactly how does a bank operate? How does a bank make its money? Give us a little more insight so we feel more comfortable trusting our banks. Can you kick us off with that?
No, yeah, I'd be delighted to, and then love to hear from Ivy and Teresa. Really at a high level, banking, it can be a pretty basic business, like many of the businesses on the call. I mean, it's a spread business where deposits are our raw materials, right? And that's actually the most critical relationship to the bank is the deposits, because that's the raw materials for the bank. And as everyone knows, interest rates are very, very low on deposits right now for a variety of reasons. So then banks take that money and turn around and lend it out to businesses, to people to buy homes and cars and things of that nature, and obviously charge a higher rate on the loan than they pay on the deposits. So at its simplest, it's a spread business where we've had trouble, right? Great Depression, financial crisis, was sometimes some banks just get a little too carried away with very exotic things that are way too complex. But at its core, you gather deposits, you lend them out at a reasonable margin, and it need to be profitable, just like all the businesses. And that's kind of the
and that's key. Just like every other business needs to have systems for operating and be profitable and have rules of engagement. One of the things you said to me about your grandma and what was that comment you made when we talked last night?
Well, I think some people get frustrated when banks aren't able always to make loans. I think it's important to remember it's not our money, right? So it's my grandmother's money, it's your relative's money. And so, banks have a responsibility to lend it out very responsibly, because, grandma wants her money back. We need to be prepared to do it, and we need to get paid back to do so.
Ivory and Therese, do you guys want to chime in on that? Anything you want to add?
John nailed it.
Go ahead, Ivory.
Thank you. So, John, and I give, in all candor to the group, I give John a lot of crap because he works for the enemy. But, but you know, he brings up some really good points, Jean. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from John's presentation is that people have relationships with people. People are friends with people. People are not friends with institutions. And to that point, people trust people. People don't trust programs. People don't trust institutions. People trust and follow people. For the ladies on this phone, how many hair salons has your stylist worked for? But you have followed that stylist no matter where they are, right? Banking isn't so dissimilar in that regard. And that relationship is critical for people who are looking to build a business, to grow a business. We talk about, another thing that John talked about was the Great Depression and the impact that that had on our society. And then we think about the Great Recession of 2008, where banks and some of the folks, the banks that are represented even on this call, were contributing. We contribute to the problem, right? And that exacerbated the issue of trust in our community. In 2020, banks are part of what's facilitated the solution. So think about the programs that have been offered during this pandemic for small business customers, the EIDL loans, the PPP loans, the SBA making payment reliefs, making payment relief payments. Those all had to be facilitated through a bank. And so having a relationship with a banker, no matter what bank that is critical to have an advocate for you to navigate through the nuances of what you qualify for, what's available to you, what you can leverage that will have the greatest impact on your bottom line. That's where that expertise comes into play. So John really brought up some really good points. And I think we have a lot of work to do in the financial services industry, being a woman of color. I'm just a couple of years younger than John, but I've been in banking for about 17 years. And I've seen the perception of the public with banks, primarily in the Black community. It's mind-boggling. And traditionally speaking, just in my own experience, if I can just share my own personal experience,
Please do.
in going through the Paycheck Protection Program, literally the news hadn't been out 15 minutes. I mean, we were all glued to our phones. We were looking at the coronavirus statistics. We wanted to know how many cases we had in Indiana. And then the SBA came out with this PPP loan. 15 minutes after that news aired, my emails blew up. I mean, it was like Pandora's box. The SBA hadn't even released the application yet. And so I'd reach out to some of the companies, churches in our community, Black churches in our community who didn't think that they qualified. I'd reach out proactively to some of the folks that I've established relationships with to share with them the information and how they could apply for the PPP loan. And many of them were nervous, thinking that surely this can't be free money, or what's the catch? Or how is it that this money is free? And at the end, they're going to ask me to produce some information and some documentation that I'm not going to be able to provide. And this is going to result in a loan that I can't afford to pay back. And all of that stigma that sort of came with it, because we don't trust institutions. We are human. We have an instinct, an inherent trust in people. We trust things that are like us. We are human. We trust other humans. And so it's really hard for us to grapple with trusting things we can't see or touch. And that's when that relationship comes into play. And many of you who are on this call are business owners. And you've seen the differences if you've gone to a restaurant. Everyone is doing cashless transactions. You can't use cash in a Chick-fil-A drive-through. So when you think about being a small business and trying to grow that business, what are you doing to stay on par with the direction that our society is going with digital banking and digital ways of processing transactions for your clients? how can you accept credit cards, things like that. So those are just some of the things that I wanted to add, not to take away from you, John, but those are just things that I'm really passionate about, and hopefully that's helpful to the group.
That was actually very helpful, Ivory, and a nice pickup. And, you know, John and I were kicking a few things around. He was just easier to get to than you guys. That's the only reason I didn't call you as often. But Therese.
Yeah, I wanted to share, you know, the conversation that I'm having with my customers now, not that it's different than the conversation that I had before when I was a banker, or even 3 or 4 years ago. But in between that time, what happened? We had a crisis, right? So now people, what's on the top of their minds now is, you know, what do I have in place as an emergency come up? Because the pandemic really impacted everybody. It impacted us professionally, and it impacted us personally, right? Our households, our small businesses, people that we know, and our friends. And so the conversation that I'm having, not that it has changed, but now we're being more intentional about it. And now customers are listening a little bit more about having their financial affairs in order, right? The number of deaths have increased, and some people don't have life insurance. Some people don't have money for burial. So those are the kind of questions that we are having with our customers. Again, going back to that personal and that interpersonal relationship, because we care enough about you to share about the resources that are available to you. And it's important for you also to start planning for the future. And I understand, you know, with most of us, we haven't had that educational background, or if we weren't raised knowing about credit, we weren't raised knowing about savings account. It's not a priority until a crisis happens, right? So in the banking industry, where it comes to that trust factor, and I mentioned it again, you know, you trust the person, and the referrals come into play because they know somebody that recommended you to go see that person, right? So it doesn't matter about what you experience personally or what has happened to you. We're trying to get you on board now about having to build that trust to get you on board and try to get you in a position to where you are financially sound. Even if you might have had a little distrust in the past, and you don't want everybody in your business to see what has happened, I think it's important for you to take that step forward to say, what can I do now to put myself in a better financial position?
And you're right. If you don't want everybody in your business now, you certainly don't want them in your business reading about you in bankruptcy, because that will be everybody's business, because it will be in the newspaper. So you guys, why do you think? So let me say, when I was in the banking operations, there was someone on my staff who actually called our customers to try and get them to come in and have meetings to discuss. And we had difficulty. People didn't want to make the time. Have you guys found that same thing? Let me go to you, John, first.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And just to piggyback briefly too, I think Ivory and Therese made some great points, and I'm so glad Ivory brought up the PPP, because to me, that was the one time that locked in how critical having a relationship is. And I don't doubt for a second, Ivory's cell phone and email was blowing up. I'm sure Therese's was. People trust her. They turned to her. And then there were so many people that didn't have that. I've never seen anything like it. And I think those that did not have a relationship were, it really kind of freaking out, especially at the end of the first round. It was extraordinary. But yes, Gene, over the years, a lot of calling efforts to try to schedule a review. Either Ivory or Therese shared, like the doctor, the dentist. It's critical to have a financial review, especially if you have a business. And I think the other thing from the relationship standpoint, relationships that are meaningful take some time. And Therese talked about some give and take, but the key is the banker needs to be willing to give the time, and the business owner needs to be willing to give the time to get to know one another, to understand their needs and how they can work together. So absolutely, it's when times are good, nobody wants to meet with their banker. When times get crazy, then they can't find it soon enough. And that's when you find out, hey, if I call the toll-free number about the PPP, I'm going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Teresa or Ivory, have either of you had experiences where you took a while to bring somebody in, but you finally got them in? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So, I've had several instances. Obviously, my career started in retail, and I've had several instances where I've met with clients that have been primarily unbanked and underbanked individuals, extremely private about their personal affairs. I think our community, culturally, we are very prideful, very proud, and very private. And I think with that creates challenges when we are looking to leverage a relationship with a bank. We don't want to tell people our problems. We don't want to expose ourselves. And I think what I have found in people who are unbanked and underbanked versus those who are, and I just want to share a statistic that I think is kind of staggering. When you think about people that are unbanked or underbanked, 14% of Black people in America are unbanked or underbanked. 12% of Latinos are either unbanked or underbanked, to a 3% of whites. That is mind-blowing. And so when you think about our privacy and our not wanting to share, I've noticed with some of the clients that I work with that are either unbanked or that I've worked with in the past who are unbanked or underbanked, they don't want to share that they've had, to your point, a bankruptcy, or that they are in check systems, or that they have experienced some sort of financial turmoil. I mean, we see this all the time. And I think, again, it goes back to trust. Get engaged with someone that you can trust and be authentically transparent. And that creates a relationship that allows for your banker to really advocate for you. And I have had situations where I've said, listen, this is a judgment-free zone. I have closed my door, and I've had to get really, really dirty with some people, with many people over 18 years, where I can tell there's something you're not telling me, or you're not being fully transparent with me. And I've even had to share my own personal testimonies to people, because there's just this warped perception that bankers are perfect, and we are not. And I think having someone in a room with a closed door that you can be your authentic self with, I think that is step one to starting a relationship with a banker. And when you have trouble, to John's point, you've got a person, a human in your back pocket that can advocate for you within that institution. And candidly, bankers know other bankers. In 18 years of banking, I haven't always worked for Key Bank. And so I have friends who work for competitors. And
so Ivory, yes, Ivory, you are on a roll, girl, but I need to slow you down a little bit. We've got some questions.
Sure, go ahead. I apologize.
No. We actually, can you guys see how excited they are to help you? So call your bank, and you don't have a relationship with the building, it's the people inside. So you see the excitement, your banker's waiting for you. So let's take this question from Carol. Carol says, why is it so hard for minority business owners to get the same level of interest in their business as white business owners? Who would like to take, do I need to read that again?
No, I'd love to take that. I think I'm guessing she's not talking about like an interest rate, but actually interest in serving them.
Interest in their businesses, yes, as they seem to be interested in white business owners.
Yep, and I'd say I think that's a big disconnect, Jean, and I certainly recognize historically I resemble that remark, and that's why I'm here proactively trying to change that. And I think as far as finding a good banker, I think Ivory mentioned this. I mean, talk to accountants, talk to attorneys, maybe you work with the ISBDC and just ask for, hey, do you know a good banker? Because it's not a lack of interest in doing it. I think it's a lack of execution. And I think that's where we're trying to be much more proactive. And I've had some other ideas on that, to position ourselves to just say, Carol, I'd love to work with you. Give me a call, because it gets down to individuals and referrals. And there definitely is interest from the banks. We just need to do a better job communicating that, overcoming the lack of trust, and just making it happen.
Let me add full transparency. We all know that when the PPP first round happened, that there were some big guys who got the call and who got the money. And so I'm sure this is some of the origin of Carol's question. So let's dig a little, let's be transparent and let's say why. Well, one, we said we as Black business owners need to reach out and have that relationship. And as Ivory said, don't be afraid to go get some help. But Ivory, I think you wanted to comment on this question. I think.
Maybe. I mean, sure. No, you know, when you think about it, Therese talked about the dentist and the doctor. The dentist doesn't typically call us, right, and say, hey, you need to come and see about that cavity, right? It usually creates some sort of heartburn that prompts us to reach out. And so similarly with banks, I would like to say that we're proactive, but we're not always proactive about reaching out to people, generally speaking. And so I think raising your hand as a business owner is the first step in saying, listen, I need help. And for the participant that expressed concern around whichever institution they engaged not having an interest in their business, find another institution, find another banker. Don't stop there. Don't allow that one experience to create your destiny. There are other bankers out there. There are other banks out there. There are programs out there. The IBE is a great resource for the community. Many of them know bankers and can get you connected personally with someone they know and trust. And so I would just really want to encourage that participant. Don't stop there. Don't stop there.
I would agree with you. And Key Bank has sponsored this series for a while. In fact, I was impacted a couple of years ago by attending the Key Bank Business Series. It lit a fire under me to go out and get myself together and get my business moving. And I did that in time when the COVID situation happened. That positioned me in a great spot. So you're right. Just like Flagstar gave away $175,000 to minority banks. Was it only minority banks in that program, Therese?
Primarily, yes.
Okay. So
yes.
I'm going to have you talk a little bit more about that experience because you said it touched you, but let me take another question here from Eunice in Michigan. Eunice mentions, unfortunately, she's had more success working with credit unions. And she said she's found some banks only want to work with large businesses. So it's kind of the same thing, but on the part about credit unions, what is the difference between working with a credit union and a bank? And why might people think that?
I think I can take that question. I think that the fundamental difference between the way a bank operates and the way a credit union operates is that banks are owned typically by their shareholders. Credit unions are owned by their members. And so credit unions have a responsibility to their members. Their members are their investors. And so fundamentally, that's the major difference between the two. You typically find, and I can't speak on behalf of all credit unions, but you typically will find a greater number of offerings at a traditional bank than you would a credit union. A lot of the, when you get into the commercial world, so when you get into mid-sized companies, different types of lending structures are typically not offered with a credit union. They're just usually not as sophisticated. And so I think those are the fundamental differences. Hopefully that answers the question around how a bank operates and by how a credit union operates. We are insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Credit unions are not. They have their own governing agency that they use to protect the credit union's assets. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think it does. And I would add that you have a personality, you need to find a bank that matches your personality, just as you said with hairdressers and barbers. Ivory, you mentioned you typically find more services at a bank. You have to do what makes sense for you and your business. We're sharing with you, the main point here is have enough trust that you work with someone who will help you out before you need it. The wrong time to go looking for business credit, which is where we're going shortly to talk about, is when you need it. Because at that point, it's even more difficult for someone who wants to advocate for you to help you out. So these relationships, Therese, if you have them early, can help you be better prepared for when you need those situations, right?
Exactly. And we are intentional. I don't know, how other branches do it, but we are intentional about reaching out to our customers every so often because we want to keep that relationship and maintain that relationship. So we're doing a courtesy check-in. How are things going with you in your account relationship? Has anything changed with you? We just want to let you know that we're here to support you. And then especially, that pain point when we always bring up the pandemic, even though, our lobbies are back open, even though they're removing the mask mandate and things seem to be going back to normal, it's still not a safe place. You don't want to get too comfortable and think you can go back to your old bad habits. You want to be prepared for whatever crisis can come up. And finances is at the top of the list that impacts most families when it comes to, having resources in place, a backup plan, an emergency plan. 9 times out of 10, you'll see a GoFundMe page put up to support these families when the finances is not there available.
Okay, well, thank you. Someone asked, what difference can a banker make in my small business? So I think a lot of this this question has been answered. If you have a banker in your life, in your small business, because of the ebbs and flows in a small business, things were great for me at the end of 2019, but 2020, when COVID reared its ugly head, things weren't so great. So with the ebbs and flows to support your business, having that relationship and an advocate is what you're going to need. I like this question that I'm looking at now that says, the Community Reinvestment Act requires banks to reinvest in the communities they serve. Why isn't more information about this made public? Or is it and we just don't know where to look? John?
Yes, Jean, it's a great question. I actually had the opportunity to serve as our CRA officer several years ago. To my knowledge, it's all public information, and you can ask a bank to share their CRA report, their folder, if you will, at request. I think that's something that we probably could do better about. I know our president is participating in a group of CRA officers in the state of Indiana. I think they're always proactively trying to create more awareness with that. It's very, very important, and all banks take it very seriously. And I think it really does some good things. To my knowledge, I think it is public information that can be asked for. Maybe it's fair that maybe that could be shared a little bit better as well.
Yes.
And I think our focus is kind of doing the right thing and really following the spirit of that and servicing the credit needs of the full spectrum of the community, and authentically doing that. And of course, we have to report on that as well, but not just trying to check the boxes, but really trying to live it out authentically.
Ivory, did you want to add something to that?
Sure. All banks, all federally regulated banks have a responsibility to their community. And to John's point, it is public. You can call your financial institution and ask for a copy of the CRA public file, and your bank will be able to provide that to you. So to that listener or to that participant, I would highly encourage them to do that. And you'd be surprised the response you'll get because no one ever asked for it. But
well, I only asked you because it looked like you had something. We've got a lot of questions. Thank you, audience, for participating. We are so happy that you are engaged. So this question is, if you are a small business, whether nonprofit or for-profit, banks are not interested in developing a banking relationship with your business and helping you work to build your business. What advice do you have for a small business to find those banks or get around this? There's this prevailing thought that you bank folks, I'm the moderator, I'm not a bank person, but you bank folks are only interested in the big businesses. And so it sounds like there's some perception issues that need to be solved. But for the people out there right now, again, what would you recommend? What advice would you have? Because they're busy, so they don't have time to interview 12 different banks. Right. How would you help them determine how to match their profile with a bank that matches theirs?
If I could jump in on that quickly, because there was another point I wanted to, it's a great question. And we all know perception is reality, right? So I think that's incumbent on the banks and the bankers to help overcome that. It's not a conscious thing. A couple of things. One concept that I look at is we, the banker, if someone's applying for a business loan, let's say, I view the role of the banker is we're applying to be your banker at the same time and really want to understand kind of who's at your conference table. We talk about that a lot. Do you have a business attorney that you're happy with? If you do, great. If you don't, maybe I can suggest a couple. Do you have a CPA that you're happy with? Who helps you with your benefits? And so that I picture that conference table, for the business owner, we're trying to earn a seat at their table and understand who else is at their table. And then to help them be successful, make sure they have the other critical pieces. So those other critical pieces they may have that could recommend a banker. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but the Indiana Small Business Development Corporation is a wonderful resource. They have a lot of connections with bankers. There's the Business Ownership Initiative in Indianapolis. There's Bankable. There's SCORE. So I guess first and foremost, if I were a small business owner and I didn't have a banker, I would look to a successful business owner that I looked up to, and I would ask them, hey, can you recommend a banker? Now, there are times that business is much larger, and that's fair, and some bankers service different segments. But if it's a referral from one of their good clients, at a minimum, they would refer you to someone that services that channel. I know Ivory mentioned LinkedIn can be a good resource. Really, honestly, I think we should try to help create a database of people that could be accessible, maybe through Indiana Black Expo, of bankers like Ivory and Therese and myself and so many others that are saying, yes, we would like to meet with you. We would like to try to help you. Because the one thing too is my philosophy is we never say no on a business loan. It's not now, but here's how. So to Ivory's point, some people have had some tough times, and I will say to this group of business owners, trust us. You're not that creative. There's nothing you could have possibly ever done financially that we haven't either done ourselves. I'm not telling my story today, or seen others that have done it. So please, the door is closed. We are bound by confidentiality. We are not going to share that but we have to know, right? So if so many times you kind of go through this whole process and you get to the end and there's a big uh-oh that just didn't come up right at the beginning. Hey, let's get that out right up front, because there's nothing that can't be overcome. Sometimes it just takes time, and maybe they need to talk to a bankable or a business ownership initiative right now, or we can help you with accounts and things. But I know you're going to cut me off, Jean, so I'll just cut myself.
I sure was. We know how we roll now.
I know. Look in your eye. Okay, I'm done. Next.
But that was great information. It's difficult to cut any of you off because the information is so good, but we did only ask for a portion of our audience's time. So we have to be respectful of that and get in as much as possible. But you mentioned some key referral places. SCORE, SCORE, just Google it. BOI, the business, what is it, Office
Business
Institute?
Ownership Initiative. I think it's through the Indy Chamber now.
Okay, so I know we've got people from across the country because I sent this invite to a lot of my colleagues all over the country.
Oh, sure.
But you have similar things in your areas. We have something called the Indiana Small Business Development Corp. So in your area, you should have a small business development corp. They will do research for you. They can make recommendations on banks. So speaking of finding where do you go, you ask your CPA, ask your accountant, ask people that you know for references to a bank that they have heard about are good with small banks. The reality is a lot of the big businesses do take up a lot of time, but what you're hearing from these panelists is they want us also, but we have to show them that we want them as well. So I'm going to get another question here. Teresa, unless you had something that was burning that you wanted to offer.
No, I was just going to say the networking events have been really, really powerful for small businesses because a business know a business and a business know this business. So if you can find a way to market yourself or to get more involved in community events, that will help as well.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So are there any risks in dealing with small banks versus large banks? I know we've got, John, you're representing a community bank, which is considered a smaller bank, and it would be nice define a community bank as opposed to a larger bank like Key Bank. You're all over the country, right? Yes. Yep. And Flagstar, well, you just merged with someone, so you guys are larger. So if someone
We're expanding.
okay, if someone's looking at a smaller bank, are there any risks associated with Mr. John over there at Citizen versus Key Bank?
Well, I tell you, banking is an incredibly regulated industry. And there's a lot of information out there through the FDIC. I will say, as far as Citizen State Bank, and we are a very, very small bank. We just are, and we're proud of that. We're family owned, and we are very strong financially. There really are no adverse financial risks in doing with a business, a bank our size. Certainly Key Bank is very strong, Flagstar is very strong, but the FDIC gives a lot of protection. The regulation, as frustrating as it can be at times, gives a lot of protection. And I think the FDIC site has a lot of data on all regulated banks and scores.
So John, what makes you be classified as a small bank? Is that in terms of assets or
Yes.
accounts? What is it?
It's assets. I'm a little embarrassed. I think technically under 10 billion in assets, I think may technically define a community bank, but that's a huge space. So it's not a secret. We're probably about 750 million in assets today. So we're under 1 billion. So other banks that still could be community banks are much larger than us as well. I believe it's 10 billion though, Jean.
Okay. The key thing that you said, my takeaway is you have to follow the same guidelines and regulations as all the other banks. So you don't get to skirt around anything. So the same high standards that larger banks are held to, you're held to them as well. And Ivory, thank you. You gave our Eunice the difference between a credit union versus a bank, the ownership. So in the ownership, things can be different, but credit unions are also bound by regulatory groups as well. So I think Perry, that answered your question. If not, you send me another one, but I think it did. Okay, let's see. Toby says, I'm a self-employed artist owner of a super small creative studio based in Ohio. I'm working actively on improving my relationship and my fear with money and finances. Thank you for your honesty, Toby. Does IBE have any banking suggestions, connections in Ohio? See, I told you guys we attracted people from around the country. and thank you for your gems you shared today, and we're happy to share. So IBE is Indiana Black Expo, but I don't know. And Alice, if you can put in the chat, maybe what branches in Ohio they may take a look at. And Alice, I don't know if you want to come off mute, but I can't answer that question other than I know. Ivory, were you going to offer something on that?
Oh, sure. And while Alice pulls up that information, the one thing I would share with all the panelists is that we are based out of Ohio. Interestingly enough, we're based out of Cleveland, Ohio, and we have a team of folks that are dedicated to small business owners. And we have what's called a small business financial wellness guide. So for those of you who feel as though your business is too small, I would encourage you to walk into any KeyBank branch or any other branch. I'm sure our competitors have something very similar, and go through that small business financial wellness guide. And it's literally a step-by-step questionnaire that can help expose for you where your area of opportunities are and can help guide you to that next step. But there are tons of resources in Ohio. We partner with a lot of nonprofits in the Ohio area because that's where we are headquartered. So hopefully Alice will be able to provide some of her nonprofits that she may be connected to in the Ohio market as well.
Thank you, Ivory. Just a point on networking. Therese, you brought it up. You guys, if you don't know how to network, learn how to network. In every city, town, state, there are organizations devoted to supporting small businesses. All you have to do is Google them. Back to SCORE. SCORE can direct you to a lot of your resources at Small Business Development Corp. The SBA actually funds the Small Business Development Corp. John made mention of Bankable. Bankable is another alternative that the SBA will share with you. So just do your homework, and you'll find that there are so many resources out there that are just waiting to help you. And now is the perfect time. Let's see, what am I like? Okay, now is the perfect time to get help because fortunately, our country is trying to reset and make right some of the issues that we as minorities have dealt with systemic racism. It happened. It still exists. Having an advocate is going to be great for you because if there happens to be a bad apple in some institution somewhere who's hanging on to vestiges of old non-inclusive thinking, then the advocates at your bank could help you. So just do your research, get to know people. Toby, I hope that answered your question. Let's see. Is there something else? Shirley says, I'm not a business, but this conversation is good for all. You are so right. Do you think banks treat the elderly in a disparaging manner? So Shirley is wondering if the elderly population is being overlooked and disrespected, and she used the term, I'll use her, disparaging manner. Anybody have special programs for the elderly?
I think most banks have special accounts and really try to cultivate elderly people. They tend to have pretty good financial situations and means for sure.
Okay, just ask. Just ask, you guys. You just go in. John, I love the fact that you said no just means not now, and here's how. And if they are not saying here's how, then you know what you need to do. Get up and get out and go find another one that will, because they're there for you.
Can I share something real quick? I know you're just about out of time. Just a few high level things, because it gets so confusing what's going on. But right now, Indiana, to our Indiana business, they have the Restart grant through the ISBDC, which many businesses are eligible for. It's similar to the PPP, but different. But check it out. I've seen it shared by the ISBDC pretty frequently. The SBA has a restaurant grant specifically that's direct through the SBA this time, not through the banks, for any restaurant owners that might be out there. The Federal Home Loan Bank has a grant up to $20,000 that's different. It's not pandemic related. They do it every year. It's a lot of work, a business plan for a serious business owner under $1 million in revenue. So really trying to cultivate the small businesses, and any Federal Home Loan Bank member bank can help with that. I think those are the big current grant things. Again, because I think it's just so much noise, it gets confusing. I wanted to at least be sure to share those.
Actually, there are so many grants out there. If you go to COVID Relief SBA, if you just put anything COVID related and grants related or the CARES Act, you will find tons of information. Visa has a grant going. Well, we won't go into that. That's a whole nother webinar. But you do the work. And as Joanne said, based on her idea, the business is so busy trying to run the business that it's hard for them to make the time to develop these relationships. As I said, they can't make it to 10 different banks. So she is asking, banks may have to have alternative hours or times for access. I know online banking is huge because you can do that 24 hours a day. And I know from my own banks that they're making online banking so much easier. So I will just offer that as an option because online banking is 24 hours. They typically have an online banking person to support you if you have technology issues. And they typically have, I'm seeing banks and credit unions starting to have webinars and sessions on credit. So that tells me there's so much going on. I'm going to move to the next question unless one of you guys wanted to add something here at this point. Okay. All right. Let's see. There is a big gap for small business in terms of financial products available to them when they are just starting out. It's no secret that businesses of color have difficulty accessing capital when they need it. Yeah. Most businesses of color rely on family and credit cards to get started. What products do you offer a startup or an early stage business? Thank you so much, Pam Banner, because we did need to come back to business credit. Eunice Gann, if you're still on the line, you've done a lot in the business credit space. If you don't mind, drop your information in the chat because I know you, or drop some information in the question and answer portion if you like. But you guys, here it is. What do you have for them just starting out?
Startups are very, very difficult. That's a fair question. And just a quick point why that is banks love to look backwards. It's just by nature. They like to see that if we make you this loan, you can pay us back based on today's numbers and 2020 numbers and 2019 numbers and 2018 numbers. It's just a fact, historical cash flow. So when you're brand new, there's no history. And we get real uncomfortable looking forward. And that's where projections are so critical. I know like the ISBDC can help with projections, but frankly, the friends and family, I've heard it called funny money. I mean, is really not uncommon across the spectrum for startup. The SBA is open to helping banks. And just a real quick note there, Gene. So the reason banks work with the SBA, because we're so regulated, like a startup, for example, we can't make a loan to a pure startup on our own and meet federal safety and soundness guidelines. So the SBA helps banks make loans sometimes they couldn't otherwise. But even with the SBA, startups are very, very difficult. But I think the friends and the family, I think having a conversation sooner rather than later. Sometimes there's other income in the household. Sometimes there's other resources. So it's worth a conversation because whether it's at startup or after 2 years or 3 years in business, the sooner you know, are there other issues that are going to make it difficult to borrow? Let's get those out and work on everything at once. But startups they're tough. They really are.
Mm-hmm. Therese, Ivory, you have something to offer there?
Startups are just as challenging as an individual who has no credit as well, right? So I know on the personal side, we often recommend like the secure credit card. We don't have that with Flagstar on the business side, secure credit cards, but we do have secure business line of credit. So sometimes it might take you utilizing your own money to secure a line of credit to get that credit going for you, because you do have to have a track record and then be in business maybe for at least 2 years to start to show the business history side of it, of your business as a startup. So
just let me say, for anyone who needs to jump off the line, please complete the survey. It's actually being listed there. But again, this is how we determine what you really want to hear. We may have to do a part 2 to this one because we still have things that we can address. So speaking of credit, so how much is your personal credit considered when you start wanting to look for business credit, you bankers?
So I can speak on behalf of KeyBank. We are what you consider a cash flow lender. So to John's point, we like to talk about the cash or the liquidity of the business. The liquidity is just a fancy word for how much money you have, right? And I think bankers, we use these terms that can be intimidating. So those are the things we look at. And he mentioned another thing, projections. And this is where we look forward to see the kind of liquidity or capital money that you anticipate your business to have in the future. And this is where banks leverage the SBA. And the SBA basically protects banks essentially against default, right? And so we leverage these programs for new business owners to help them, open a business or grow a business. Now, as it relates to credit, I mean, this is where having a relationship with the bank not having a relationship with the bank could be really expensive. Candidly, 20% of African Americans, just over 20%, I think it's 26% of African Americans in the United States have a credit score of 700 or better, compared to 60% of whites. And so when we look at the difference to the question before of, why do banks have this perception of white businesses versus Black businesses? That's one of the contributing factors. And that's why having that relationship is important. Knowing what your credit score is, having an advocate who can sit down with you and review the items on your credit report and to show you how you can potentially fight to have some of those items removed. Secured credit cards, to Teresa's point, is really important, and leveraging programs that are available. So it is extremely important to have personal liquidity and personal credit worthiness when you look to engage a bank, because if you own that business, the way you manage your finances is very highly likely the way you will manage your business. And so we have to look at both sides of the coin. And so that's where that relationship piece becomes very important.
Thank you. Thank you. So as a new business owner, and this is actually my third business, I had a leadership training company 10 years ago. I opened a State Farm insurance agency, and I'm in my third business, which is a leadership training company. Having financial information available before you open your business, getting those projections to see what that industry is going to be like. When you have that information and you've done your homework and you show up to your banker is going to be much, much more willing to work with you. And they give them something to work with, and then you can use them as a resource. But as a new business, you may think it's a great business idea, but would you lend money to you? Right. That's the question. So if you wouldn't, then why do you expect the bank to? So John, I saw you light up.
Well, just a side note on that, and Ivory made a great point there too on the credit score. So literally, the credit score is the single greatest determinant on the likelihood of repayment. But on business plans, I'm really very passionate about that, Gene, is that to remember your business plan is for you. Don't write a business plan for the bank. Don't write it for me. Don't write it for Ivory. Don't write it for Therese. Guess what? We don't necessarily read them all. We go to the numbers. But it's an exercise for the owner, right? Because being a business owner, it's part art and it's part science. There's some real science to it. So how are you going to make money? And going through that exercise, what are your expenses going to be? What's your income going to be? What's your profit going to be? And guess what? It's going to be wrong, but that's the starting point. Well, where were you off? So that's where you have to review that plan every year for yourself, not for the bank.
And I'm gonna have to. Well, we're at a full 75 minutes now, and we could go on for another 75 because we still have a lot of participants on the line. But we're gonna have to wrap it up here. And I am going to, this concludes our session. Therese, thank you so much. And thanks to
For having me.
Flagstar for letting you join us. Ivory, thank you so much. And big kudos to Key Bank, who really helped me get it going. John, I've enjoyed getting to know you at Citizens Bank, and I'm sure the audience appreciates it as well. Thank you to the IBE, and you can find more information about the IBE and the business series by visiting the website, indianablackexpo.com. For more information. This session has been taped, so we will send it to you, has been recorded, so you can share it with others and listen to it later. My information is there. Feel free to reach out to me. I am an MB, minority business owner, woman-owned business owner, and a woman-owned small business designated to do business with the government, as well as my leadership training company. Always willing to help people. Reach out and let me know if I can help you. Thank you so much, everybody. Make it a great day and make a great life and have a profitable business life. Goodbye, all.